worked nights as a dispatcher for our state patrol. It happened during one of the worst snowstorms we saw that winter. The kind that closes highways, strands truckers, and pushes emergency services right to the edge. Dispatch was flooded with calls that night. Spinouts, abandoned vehicles, jackknifed semis, you name it. Around 11 p.m., a call came in from a woman named Megan. She sounded steady enough at first, but there was tension under her voice, the kind people get when they're trying very hard not to sound scared. She told me she had slid partially off the shoulder on Highway 12. The wind pushed her just enough that when she tried to pull forward, the tires spun uselessly. Backing up risked sending her fully into a ditch. So she did the right thing. She pulled to the safest angle she could manage, kept the engine running, and called for help. I took down her location, marked her as stranded but safe, and told her a trooper would be on the way. The closest unit was Trooper Harris, about 10 to 12 minutes out, depending on the conditions. And that's when everything shifted. While we were going through the routine questions, hazards on, seatbelt on, engine stable, she suddenly stopped talking. Not because the call dropped, not because of background noise. She just paused. Then she said, in a much quieter voice, "There's a man standing by the trees." I sat up straighter. That's never something you ignore. I asked her to describe him. She said she couldn't see much. The snow was coming down hard. But she could make out a figure. Tall enough to stand out against the tree line. Not walking. Not waving for help. Just standing there, facing her car. I asked if she thought he might be stranded too. No, she said. He's not near the road. He's just watching. Those were her exact words. I told her to stay inside the vehicle, lock the doors, keep the lights on. Standard safety protocol anytime a stranded motorist feels uneasy. While we waited for Harris, she kept glancing toward the trees. I could hear the windshield wipers in the background, the steady rhythm of them trying to keep up with the storm. At one point she whispered, "I think he moved. I think he's closer now." But she couldn't be sure. The snowfall was thick. That kind of swirling sideways snow that makes distance feel wrong. I tried to keep her talking. People calm down when they hear a voice, and I've learned over the years that silence is usually the point where panic starts to creep in. But then she said something that I've never forgotten. "I don't see him anymore." Her tone wasn't panicked. It was more like confusion, as if she was trying to convince herself she just couldn't see through the storm. I asked if she saw him walk away. "No," she said. "He was there, and now he's not." I told her that snow can erase visibility instantly, which is true. I told her the trooper was close, also true. But before I could finish reassuring her, she went silent. Not the phone, not the line. Her. "Megan, are you still with me?" Nothing. I listened harder. Her engine was still running. I could hear the hum of the heater, but no breathing, no movement, no voice. I repeated her name over and over. No response. 2 agonizing minutes passed before Trooper Harris arrived on scene. I stayed on the phone as he approached the vehicle. His radio cracked as he updated. "Dispatch, I've got the car in sight." I asked him to confirm if she was inside. There was a long pause, the kind where you can hear wind rush past the mic. Then, "Negative. Vehicle's empty." My stomach dropped. He described what he saw. The driver's door was closed. The engine was still running. Her purse was on the passenger seat. Her phone, the one still connected to me, was on the floorboard. But Megan Porter was nowhere in sight. And this next part is what has kept this case alive in my mind for years. There were footprints, but not enough. Just a few impressions beside the driver's door. The storm had already drifted snow across the shoulder, softening the prints, scattering them. No clear trail, no direction, no second set belonging to the man she claimed to see. Trooper Harris did a sweep of the immediate area, shining his flashlight into the tree line. Nothing. No movement. No silhouette of a man. No broken branches. No disturbed snow. Nothing indicating someone had walked toward the forest or away from it. Within the hour, additional units arrived and a formal search began. They marked the last place. Footprints appeared. They followed every partial trail the snow allowed. They checked both sides of the road for drag marks or signs of struggle. There was nothing. The storm erased almost every clue before it could be collected. The official missing person search went on for days. Drones when the weather allowed. Snowmobiles. Volunteers. Dogs that couldn't track anything because the wind had scattered every scent. Not one trace of her was ever found. The theories came in waves. Some said she panicked and wandered into the woods. But if she did, the search teams would have found at least something. A shoe print, a scrap of clothing, a direction of travel. Others said someone picked her up. But why leave her purse and phone? Why not take the vehicle if robbery was the motive? The darker theory was the one I couldn't stop thinking about. The man in the trees, the one she watched for minutes, the one who seemed to move closer, the one who disappeared from her line of sight right before she stopped answering me. Harris searched the tree line extensively. He found no footprints from anyone who could have been standing where she said. But here's the part that still unsettles me. During heavy snowfall, footprints can fill in within minutes, and if someone approached from the forest instead of the road, if they came from deeper woods, if they lay flat, crawled, or moved low to the ground, that snow would have erased everything. Every impression, every trail, every explanation. In the official report, Megan's disappearance is listed as missing, presumed dead. Storm conditions, disorientation, hypothermia. But that's not what I heard on the phone. I heard a woman who was cautious but clear, scared but rational, sitting safely in her car with the doors locked, waiting for help that was less than 10 minutes away. And in the moments before she went silent, I heard her describe someone watching her from the trees. On a back highway in Colorado, during one of the worst snowstorms I've ever been caught in. I was driving home from a work trip, taking a 2-lane state highway that cut through miles of empty ranch land. It was normally a peaceful drive, no traffic, big sky, just a straight shot through open country. But that afternoon, the storm rolled in fast, the kind of snow that doesn't fall. It whips sideways in sheets, erasing the horizon and swallowing the road. I should have stopped in town and waited it out. I know that now. But I kept telling myself I was only an hour away from home. Another bad decision. The wind kept pushing my truck sideways, and even with my hazards on and the heat blasting, I couldn't see more than 10 feet ahead. Everything was white. The road, the fields, the air itself. Just shifting shapes and blowing snow. Eventually, my tires hit a patch of ice I didn't see coming. The truck fishtailed, spun sideways, and slid gently, almost gracefully, into a shallow ditch off the right side of the road. No crash, no injuries, just stuck. I tried rocking the truck back and forth, switching between drive and reverse, but the wheels just spun uselessly. Snow built up around them fast. I wasn't going anywhere. I pulled out my phone. No signal. Not even one bar. It wasn't surprising. That stretch of highway barely had service on a sunny day, let alone in a blizzard. For a few minutes I sat there thinking. The smart thing would have been to stay in the truck, keep the heat on, and wait for another car to come by. But the visibility was so bad that I wasn't sure anyone would come by, or see me even if they did. 15 minutes went by, then 20. The snow was piling up along the windows. That's when I saw headlights. A truck approached from behind. Old, maybe late 70s or early 80s. Dark color, hard to tell with the storm. Its headlights cut through the snow just enough to make out the shape. The man in the blue coat approached my window first. He tapped on it, motioning for me to roll it down. When I cracked it open, he leaned down and gave me a tight smile. "You stuck?" he asked. His voice was hard to read, not unfriendly but flat. The kind of tone someone uses when they're trying to sound normal but don't quite pull it off. "Yeah," I said. "Hit some ice. No signal out here." "Lucky we came by," he replied. "We're with County Rescue. We can take you into town." Something in my stomach tightened a little. Maybe it was the way he said it. Too fast, too casual. Not how an actual emergency responder usually introduces themselves. The second man stood a few feet behind him, hands in his coat pockets, watching me without blinking. It wasn't the storm making me uneasy anymore. I asked, "Which county? You guys from up north or down toward Delta?" Blue Coat didn't hesitate, but he didn't answer the question either. "We just need to get you out of here," he said. "Storm's too dangerous to wait." His eyes flicked toward my passenger door. "You should come with us." The way he said it wasn't reassuring. It wasn't official. It wasn't even helpful. It sounded expectant. I forced a polite smile. "All right. Just let me call 911 first. Let them know I'm getting a ride." I didn't have signal, but they didn't know that. What happened next is what truly set every alarm bell in my body off. Both men froze. Not startled. Not confused. Frozen. Like two animals realizing they'd been spotted doing something they shouldn't. Blue Coat's eyes narrowed ever so slightly. The second man shifted his weight, still staring at me, his expression blank. After a long second, Blue Coat said, "No need for that." It wasn't a suggestion. It wasn't a reassurance. It was a correction. Something inside me clicked. I shook my head. "I'll call anyway. Protocol, you know." Neither of them said a word. They just turned around at the exact same time and walked back to their truck. Not hurriedly, not annoyed, just silent. When they climbed in, the driver didn't even turn his headlights on. The truck lurched forward and disappeared into the whiteout, swallowed by the storm. No lights, no hazard flashers, just gone. I sat there gripping the steering wheel long after they'd vanished. Eventually, after another hour or so, a plow came through. The driver radioed for actual help, and a deputy arrived with chains to pull me out. While he worked on the truck, I told him what happened. The two men, the claim of County Rescue, the sudden withdrawal. When I mentioned calling 911, the deputy stopped tightening the chains and looked at me sharply. "There aren't any rescue crews out tonight," he said. "Roads closed past mile marker 42. We're the only ones responding in this district." He paused. "And you're nowhere near any volunteer units." I felt my stomach drop. "Maybe they were just locals trying to help," I offered. He shook his head. "Locals wouldn't pretend to be county, and nobody out here drives with their lights off in a storm like this. That's a death wish." His tone wasn't dramatic. It was matter-of-fact, which somehow made it worse. Whoever those two men were, they weren't rescuers, they weren't neighbors, and they weren't out there for me out of kindness. This happened a few winters ago, during one of the worst blizzards my area had seen in over a decade. At the time, I was living alone in a small rental house on the edge of town, close enough to see neighbors from a distance, but far enough that on cold, quiet nights, it felt like I was the only person for miles. The house wasn't fancy, just a one-story place with old, drafty windows and a heater that worked when it felt like it. But it was cheap and quiet. and sitting on a little patch of property that backed up to a stretch of woods. I'd only lived there a few months when the storm hit. The forecast had warned everyone to stay inside. Wind gusts over 40 miles an hour, falling temperatures, snow piling up quicker than plows could manage. Basically, a do not go anywhere unless your life depends on it kind of storm. So I did what most people probably did. I stocked up on food, made sure I had extra blankets, and settled in for a long, boring night. By late evening, the snow was coming down in sideways sheets, hammering the windows hard enough that they rattled in their frames. My porch light was on, but from inside it looked like staring into a white wall. Visibility was maybe 20 feet at best. It was the kind of night where nothing should have been moving outside, so when I heard the first knocking sound, I ignored it. It wasn't even a knock at first, more like something tapping faintly against wood, a branch maybe, a loose shutter. The wind was vicious, so it didn't feel strange. But a few minutes later, it happened again. 3 knocks. Soft, spaced evenly apart. Tap, tap, tap. I paused the movie I was watching and listened. And then, nothing. Just wind. Just the endless scrape of snow swirling across my porch. I told myself it was probably a piece of ice falling from the roof, or something shifting from the cold. Houses make weird noises in winter. It didn't have to mean anything. But then, maybe 5 minutes later, it came again. 3 knocks. Exactly the same rhythm. This time it didn't sound like it was coming from the porch. It sounded closer, like it was coming from the side of the house near the bedroom. I muted the TV and held my breath, waiting for it again. The wind roared. The heater clicked on. Snow hit the windows in waves, but there was no more knocking. Eventually, I convinced myself it was nothing and went back to watching TV. But the weird feeling never fully left. Around midnight, I decided to go to bed. The house had that deep, icy stillness that only happens when the world outside has gone silent under layers of snow. Even the wind had died down a bit, trading the earlier howling for a low, muffled hum. I brushed my teeth, turned off lights, and stepped into my bedroom. That's when the knocking came again. 3 knocks, slow, deliberate. Right outside my bedroom window. I froze in the doorway. My first thought was that I must have imagined it. My second thought was that someone was actually out there. I waited. Nothing. The silence stretched long enough that I started to doubt myself. But then, tap, tap, tap. Exactly the same rhythm. I finally moved, just enough to reach for my phone on the dresser. I didn't call anyone yet. I just held it like it was some kind of protection. My bedroom window had blinds, but they weren't fully closed. There was a tiny sliver where the edges met, leaving the faintest vertical line of outside light peeking through. Snow was reflecting against the glass, creating a kind of dim glow. And for a split second, I saw something interrupt that glow. A shadow. Close. Too close. I stepped backward, slowly, trying not to make a sound. I kept telling myself it had to be something logical, a branch, a loose piece of siding, maybe even an animal. But deep down, I knew none of those things would knock 3 times, the exact same way, multiple times. My heart was pounding so hard I felt it in my throat. I needed to look. I absolutely didn't want to, but the not knowing was worse. So I took one slow step toward the blinds, then another, and using just 2 fingers, I pulled one slat down. What I saw didn't make sense at first. Footprints. A single line of footprints in the snow leading directly to my window. The snow was falling hard, but the prints were clean, not filled in or softened. They looked fresh. Very fresh. And what made my stomach drop, what made my knees actually go weak, was the fact that there were no footprints leading away. Just one trail, straight up to the window. And then nothing. It looked like someone had walked up, stood there, and just vanished. I stepped away from the blinds fast, breathing hard. I called 911. My voice shook the entire time I was explaining what I saw. The dispatcher told me to stay on the line and move away from the window. She kept asking if I could hear anything else outside, but I didn't. No knocks, no footsteps, no breathing, nothing. Just the storm. It took the police almost 20 minutes to reach me because the roads were so bad. When they finally arrived, they walked the perimeter of my house with flashlights while I watched from the doorway. One of the officers motioned for me to come outside. He pointed to the footprints I'd seen, the same single-file trail that stopped at my bedroom window. He crouched down, studying the snow carefully. Then he said something that made my whole body shiver in a way the cold air couldn't. These prints look compressed, but not from someone standing upright. More like someone lying down. I stared at him. Lying down, I repeated. He nodded. Yeah, like someone crawled up to your window, or stayed pressed flat to stay out of sight between knocking. I felt dizzy. The idea of someone lying in the snow beneath my window, close enough to look in, close enough to hear me moving around inside, made my skin crawl. The officers checked the property again, even looked for drag marks or partial trails, but the wind had already started filling in anything beyond the immediate prints. They found nothing else. The only evidence they left behind was a line of footprints leading to my window, and none leading away.